Hey YouTube, welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to talk about sensor sizes and does sensor size really matter. Also, I picked up a new speed booster, which is pretty cool, and I wanted to go over how I can use this to turn my Sony camera into an Alexa 65 field of view. First off, I want to talk about why a filmmaker would pick something like the Alexa 65. Alexa 65 is a special sensor because they took their classic sensor and they just stacked three of them side by side. And so you're getting a high resolution image at 6K. And you're getting that wonderful dynamic range of around 14 stops, but you're also getting that huge field of view larger than full frame. And so those three things make that camera very appealing, especially when the story calls for it. And the Alexa 65 is a digital sensor, but it's modeled to have a similar size of 65mm film. And so I guess the real question is, why would you pick a bigger format? So a lot of directors of photography tend to lean towards this style of shooting and this 65 image capture because it gives you a larger than life feel when you compare it to like the extreme end, like a micro four thirds sensor. A lot of the images that you get from those cameras do seem a lot flatter because you're having to use a lot wider lenses. And so basically the main difference here is the compression that you're going to be seeing with the different lens choices. And so now that I lightly touched on why you would use one sensor size over another, this is where this speed booster comes in. I know a lot of you probably heard about the speed boosters from Metabones. Those are really good ones. This essentially does the same thing. This kippon baveyes speed booster is an E-mount to Mamiya 645 adapter that adapts medium format Mamiya lenses to Sony E-mount cameras. There's also a speed booster lens in here that allows for a 0.7 magnification of your image. And so when this adapter is used on a Sony mirrorless full frame body, this essentially gives you the same view of an Alexa 65. So how the speed booster works is basically I have here an 80mm Mamiya medium format lens. You would get the compression and field of view of 80mm on a full frame camera. But once I put it on this speed booster, it's a 0.7 speed booster. And so basically that means I have to take 80mm and I have to multiply it by 0.7. You're going to get 56. That is the now equivalent field of view when I put this on my full frame Sony camera. So I get a 56mm field of view, but I still have the compression of an 80mm. And as we know, the longer the focal length, the blurrier the background tends to get, and therefore I'm getting a 56mm, which is almost more of a standard look, a little bit more telephoto, but close to a standard look. But I'm gonna be getting a blurrier background because of the compression that this format allows me to get. Now, like I said, that might not be for everybody, but if the story calls for it, this is a very good tool to have, essentially giving you an Alexa 65 field of view. And so it brings into question for me, is the difference really worth it? And I think that's where you come down to for style and what the story calls for. And the adapter is expensive. It's around $700 just for this piece alone. Not to mention it depends on what format you get. There's a slew of different medium-sized format glass. I went with the Mamiya not only because they're the cheapest, but I also enjoy the fact that they are usually the fastest lenses as well. So you do sacrifice some of the sharpness for speed, but I thought it was a good trade-off because I am using these vintage lenses on newer, sharper sensors. And so this adapter is not going to get you the color science or the level of detail that the Alexa 65 has, but if you have a camera that lets you shoot log or even RAW with some cameras, you should not have a problem getting to your desired look. Now, I know there's people out there that say, oh, you can never replicate an RE sensor. There's something special about the sensor. It's not just the colors and things like that. And that's true. There's no way that I can get my Sony, especially an A7S II, to exactly replicate an Alexa 65. It's, I think, a physical impossibility. But don't forget, the whole RE company created the Alexa line to try to replicate film. And there are filmmakers out there, notable filmmakers, Quentin Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, that will tell you that there is no digital camera that can replicate film. You see what I'm trying to get at here? It's not necessarily to say RE has 100% replicated film, but it got close enough to where a lot of filmmakers switched over. And so for a low budget filmmaker, I think close enough is enough. Now that we went through that, I want to go over my steps that I take in order to get as close as possible to the Alexa 65 look. All right, guys, I'm here in DaVinci Resolve with some Sony A7S II footage. And so let's go into the color tab. And to start off, I like to add an effect on the first node, and this is color space transform. And this is going to transform our Sony color science into RE color science. So since this is the A7S II, I do shoot in S-Log2. So the color space is Sony S-Gamut 3 Cine, and I shot in S-Log2 for the gamma. And then for the output, RE wide gamut 4 and RE log C4. And so you can see what that's doing. That's flattening out the image even more, and that's basically how RE log C footage looks before you grade it. Okay, and then so now that we're done with that, I come in here, and the next thing that I like to do is add another node, and this one is going to be our noise reduction. And so I just use the chroma, not the luma, and that's just going to take out the digital noise, the color noise, and leave the fine grain, which basically is basically just a nice texture overall for the image, and it's more along the lines of what you would see in film, and so it's a little bit more pleasing to my eye. You can definitely play with the settings to get it how you like. And the next node is for exposure adjustments and also color tint changes. And after that, I add the LUT. So you can come in here and you can just go into RE and use a regular Rec 709 LUT. And you can see it doesn't look too bad at all. Now a lot of things go into this, the lighting and exposure and things like that. But what I like to do here, instead of using the regular RE LUT, I come down here, and I've already purchased the Pocket 4K to Alexa LUT by Juan Malera. And when I choose this LUT, it's just a little bit more pleasing to me. As you could see, the greens still stay the same. But for me personally, I enjoy this a little bit better. Now I can come back into my exposure node, and it looks like I would want to bump this up a little bit, and we can go maybe here, and you can see that's just brightening up the image just a little bit. And this is all personal preference. These are things that you can choose whether you want to do them or not. And then a lot of the time too, you're not going to see footage from a movie with just a Rec 709 LUT slapped on it. They are taking the time to push and pull the colors and get the specific look like they want. And so this is a good starting point. And then what I normally like to do is add another node at the end of here, and we can go into, have a whole bunch of different like creative LUTs here. Okay, that's like a really extreme look, so maybe we like it, but it's just too strong. So we can come back here to the output and we can scale it back. And then you can see the difference from here to here. Now, if you're using an FX3 or a newer Sony camera, I believe Juan Malera has grades specifically for those, but he doesn't have one for the Sony A7. And so this is how I get around it. All right, guys, that's it for this video. How to get the Alexa 65 look out of any Sony camera or any mirrorless full frame camera for that matter. I hope you like what you saw. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below. I want to thank my new and old subscribers as well. Thank you guys so much for your support, and until next time.